Welcome to Southern Cooking Made Simple. Easy, simple recipes with very few ingredients brought from my ancestors to your table. This is our farm. We have 73 acres and we live on top of one of those mountains here in the Appalachian Mountains of West Virginia. It's absolutely beautiful here. This is a ramp dinner and muggles, everything from the land. This is our cattle and our garden. We raise our green beans and corn and things for a salad like cucumbers and onions, string beans, a few things. I do have a little bit of rhubarb and some garlic. I grew some parsley. That's a picture of the manger that my son made one year for the cattle. This is Wim and Marie Holcomb, my grandparents. This is my mother's mother. And we used to go to her house all the time when I was growing up. My grandma would always be canning. Like in the summertime, she would can her green beans and her corn. And they had like strawberries in the garden and gooseberries, rhubarb, you name it. You could go over to Grandma's and there was always something going on. This is Grandpa Wim, and that's him in a tree foraging for some sardis. We was on our way home from the hunting camp in Sugar Grove, Virginia, and he wanted to stop and get some of that sardis out of a tree. He was so resourceful. He would always go out and forage for stuff all the time. He brought in sassafras for tea, and he made like homemade bread in a great old big tub with 5 pounds of flour at a time. And he would make that homemade bread. Oh my goodness, it was so good. Anything that we wanted, we didn't have money to go out and buy it, so we made everything. Oh my goodness, it was so wonderful growing up in Clay County here in West Virginia. These mountains are so full of delicious culinary delights. It would amaze you the things that you can go out and get off of the land here in West Virginia. Ramps in the spring and muggles or morels. Some people call them different things. This is my grandmother and grandfather, Blanche and Wilbur Holcomb. That's my great-grandparents, and that was Papa Wim's parents. This is Mommy and Mama Marie and the other kids. We would go everywhere in that 55 Chevy. There was all kinds of diners when I was growing up, and we would go out to diners on the weekend and get a burger and fries. It was so much fun growing up here in the mountains. These Appalachian mountains are very resourceful when it comes to things to do, but everything's a little bit different than everybody else in the world, and we like it that way. It's special growing up here in these mountains. This is my grandparents, Brack and Lily Legg. She was originally a Klein, and that's Grandmother Marie sitting to the left of Grandma. My Aunt Pauline in the back in the white shirt, she married an Italian man and gave me an intense love for everything Italian. Oh, she was such a good cook, and you could go to her house and smell that spaghetti cooking. She put a squid in her spaghetti when she made it. Everything that she made was made exactly like it was made from Italy, and my mom learned all that right here in these Appalachian Mountains. My mother was a very good cook, and she used to put things, she said she would even put leftovers onto my high chair the next day for breakfast and lunch. And she was being frugal, but it got me used to her really bold, intense flavors when she cooked at a very young age. And to this day, I try to make my food taste half as good as my mother's did. She was an excellent cook. Here's a picture of Grandma and Grandpa and my mom, and that's me hanging out the window. We would go everywhere in that 55 Chevy. We used to go to diners and places on the weekend, get something to eat, get a cheeseburger, an ice cream. It was so much fun growing up here in these mountains of West Virginia. There's a lot of things to do. It's different than living in other places of the world. Most of the things you do have something to do with the land. You're hunting for something or you're foraging for something. In the springtime, there's ramps and muggles or morels. There's all different types of things here in these mountains. There's greens and berries. And my grandfather, this is a picture of him. He was in a picture here. He was coming in from just killing a bear. And that's a picture of him with his, I believe that's a 37 or a 36 Chevy. And Mom said he lost that car in a card game one time and came in riding a horse, and he had horsehair all over his suit. He was a very talented gunsmith, and he used to make guns and stuff and sell it to make extra money being a taxidermist. He was really good at that stuff. And he played music, and on the weekends, all these people that he had made musical instruments for and his friends and people from church would stop by and they would play music. Oh, it was wonderful. Growing up in these mountains, everything is based on things that you already have or that you can go out and find in the woods. Wasn't based on things that you go out and buy at the store. It was what we already had or what we could use, and we could forage in order to make something that would be delicious. Here in these mountains, it's ever changing culinary delights. With every different type of season, there was different types of foods and things to forage for. This is a picture of my grandma and grandpa Homer and Stella Fitzwater, Mommy and her brother Wilbur. And here's another trip that they went to one of the national parks in that 55 Chevy, and you'll notice that my daddy gets a picture of that 55 Chevy in just almost every picture he took. He was very proud of that car. This was a picture on their wedding day over at Sycamore in Clay County. We grew up right by the road. You see the road out there going by. It's just something we was used to. When you grow up in the mountains, you find things to do that you don't necessarily have to go anyplace else. You can do it right there at your home. This is Grandma and Grandpa Brack and Lily Legg. Now, my grandmother here, she was a Cherokee Indian. This was Grandma Marie's mother, and she was a really good cook. Oh my goodness, could she cook? You'd go to her house on Sunday, and she'd always have chicken and dumplings, and she'd take that chicken and cut it into a million pieces, and then she would fry that, and then she would take the back and the scraps and the bones and things, scraps that she had left over, and she would make, with chicken broth, she'd make dumplings. Oh my goodness, she was a good cook. You're going to love these recipes. This is a picture of our hunting camp. It's in Sugar Grove, Virginia, and we would go out there, and the women would cook up the food and stuff that the men would go out in and gather during the day. And they would bring in that food, and we didn't go out there and just make sandwiches or something. They cooked a full-on meal. They would bring flour and meal and spices and things from home, and we would have delicious meals out at that hunting camp, based primarily on what they had brought in. It was fantastic. And we cooked on an old wood cook stove. Everything was made from scratch. If we had French fries and cheeseburgers, we didn't go out somewhere and get them all the time. Well, on the weekend, we would go get one at the diner, but at Grandma and Grandpa's house, you made everything. They made homemade bread. Everything that we had was homemade. If we had hamburgers, we had homemade hamburger buns. Everything was delicious. All the pickles and everything was made from scratch. Everything we had was made from scratch. If we didn't make it from scratch, we didn't have it to eat. It's as simple as that, and it was absolutely delicious. We'd go up to Grandma's house. She never had water inside, so we would have to go out back and wind that bucket down inside that well and twist that thing and bring that water up and then put it over in another pail, then take that in and put that on the wooden cook stove that sat in the kitchen, catty-cornered. I can just see it. They didn't have a sink. All she had was a table there, and we carried that water in, and we would set it there and put it out in dish pans, and we had to put it on a bucket and set it on a stove so we could heat it. They didn't have a bathroom or any running water. This is a picture of the house. I can still see my grandpa sitting on the front porch, kicking his chair back, leaning up against the house. He was a very quiet man. I loved to go to their house. Grandma was Cherokee Indian. There was a picture of her sitting in the living room with these great old big black braids going down both sides. It was just a picture of an Indian sitting there staring at you. It was kind of spooky, but Grandma was real quiet, and you never heard anything out of her. My goodness, it was so much fun to go to their house. This is a picture out at the camp. That's Grandma and Grandpa, my Uncle Paul, and Daddy's and Papa's deer that they had brought in that day. Oh, the food was so good out that camp. Everything changed when you went to the camp. It was a feast beyond anything that you'd ever dream of. My grandmother was such a good cook, and she passed that all down to my mom. And my mom was excellent by her own rights. Thank you guys for stopping by for my story today. I'll see you on another video. Bye.